name's Joe. I'm a crystal meth addict. How's everybody doing tonight? There's a lot of rowdy in here, isn't there? Who's here for the first time at position of neutrality tonight? Jay, come on now. Okay, a bunch of you. Good. First of all, welcome. And second, let me warn you in advance, you're liable to experience us just a little different than other meetings of the fellowship you may have attended, whatever fellowship you may have attended. What we do here, we've been doing for a lot of years now. We just take a look at the suggested instruction for a step or so a week directly out of this book. And we use this book in Crystal Meth Anonymous. Why? The process described by the authors of this book has been proven to work with addicts of the hopeless variety. Addicts to alcohol and other substances. So although we call it a study, it's really not a teaching. There's only one teacher, and it ain't the guy behind the podium. But what I do for you is I show you how I find my experience in the book and encourage you to have your experience with the book. And if we both do our job, we will share our spiritual experience in this room tonight. How many of you have been here before and can witness for folks that happens? So when we talk to you about a spiritual experience in 12-step recovery, we're not talking about something conceptual, we're talking about something sensory. You'll feel it. And when you do, I'll know and I'll call it to your attention. Because we teach you to talk to you about the power we call God without giving you a demonstration. And some people might want to know, well, how does that demonstrate the power? Well, we have to take some things on faith. We read at almost every AA meeting, there is one who has all power. That one is God. Therefore, if you feel it and I know, we're showing you oneness. Does that make sense? And then the other question that sometimes comes up when we got a lot of new people is, why are we doing this in a CMA meeting? Because CMA does not have a singleness of purpose. So we want everyone to know how, regardless of how you identify or whether you identify at all, you're welcome here. Does that make sense? Okay, so tonight we're going to be looking at step 12. And you'll go to chapter 7 of your book. It's called Working with Others. They start out with a promise and a condition, several actually, but they tell us that practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. It works when other activities fail. Did you catch some of the promises and the conditions in there? The condition's kind of hidden in the fact they said practical experience, so it's not a theoretical exercise, is it? You're actually going to have to go out and work with others. How many of you would like some insurance against active addiction? Yes. Over the years we've lost that. We tell them you just go to meetings and somehow meeting makers make it. And, you know, it may be coincidence or not, but my experience is even meetings fail. They tell me other activities fail. And I don't speak of theories, and I don't go out for short durations. So you know. Okay, so it says this is our 12th suggestion. Now they're telling us the 12th suggestion follows. The selfish reason, the human reason why I might want to work with others is it works when other activities fail. So we're going to own our humanity. Then they're going to tell me the unselfish reason, because somewhere in your recovery you'll go from selfish to selfless without any part of your own. And some of you already know the transition. You'll see it happening. Okay? It's not a permanent state of being. You got to maintain the spiritual condition, right? Okay. So it says, carry this message to other alcoholics. You can help when no one else can. You can secure their confidence when others fail. Remember, they're very ill. Why do you think they reminded us of that? How many of you have been frustrated because someone you got to know got out active again? So we're not any good at carrying the message of hope and redemption if we're cussing them out for not being willing, are we? So they're talking to those of us at every stage. Okay, life will take on new meaning, so we got a bunch of promises coming. How many of you needed for your life to take on new meaning? How many of you have been here for a while, still need your life to take on new meaning? To watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish, to see a fellowship grow up about you, to have a host of friends. This is an experience you must not miss. Why do you think they described it as an experience and not a sight? How many of you have noticed that the world is really nothing more than what you think it is at any given moment? How many of you have viewed the same situation very differently from time to time? So there's an experience of people recovering to see loneliness vanish. Loneliness has to vanish from my thought life to know that I am not alone. And I can be all alone in a room full of people, and I can be in good company all by myself. Any of you ever had? Okay. Used to happen with a pipe or a syringe. Okay. Just trying to keep everybody real, because it doesn't matter. We've all been spiritually seekers, right? That's how we get here. All right. So we know you'll not want to miss it. Frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is the bright spot of our lives. Perhaps you're not acquainted with any drinkers who want to recover. Do you think that's true in Phoenix, Arizona today? You can easily find some by asking a few doctors, ministers, priests, or hospitals. They'll be only too glad to assist you. Don't start out as an evangelist or reformer. What's that look like? Some people think it looks like what I'm doing. The fact of the matter is, we've never advertised this meeting. It's been full like this for over a decade. So if I am an evangelist, I'm the world's worst.
Keep coming back.
Okay, so unfortunately a lot of prejudice exists. You'll be handicapped if you arouse it. So what did they tell us? If we go out trying to tell people what they should do, they quit hearing us. We show them what the benefits of the Spirit are. We don't tell them anything, right? That's why we have a fitness step. Does it start to make sense to you?
Yep.
You'll be handicapped if you arouse it. Ministers and doctors are competent, and you can learn much from them if you wish, but it happens that because of your own drinking experience, you can be uniquely useful to other alcoholics. Not so much the mess, but the message. Everyone knows how to get drunk. They may not know which dumpster to eat out of, because they may not have taken it that far. But everyone knows what it feels like to be in a prison in your mind. So if we speak to that state of mind and body, we can reach people, depth and weight. And when they feel it, they know truth even when they can't understand truth. Does that make sense? Okay, so cooperate, never criticize. To be helpful is our only aim. When you discover a prospect for Alcoholics Anonymous, find out all you can about him. If he does not want to stop drinking, don't waste time trying to persuade him. Why not? Who's the persuader? Alcohol, cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin. Much more powerful persuasive forces than us. Yes? Any of you needed any further persuasion than on that first day out of detox? Pretty fucking reasonable that day, weren't you? Okay. The reason we don't want to try and persuade them in here is we might spoil a later opportunity. How many of you have heard the people saying AA doesn't work for me? And they've never seen the program. All they've seen is the fellowship. We don't want that to happen to people. Okay, so this is advice is given for his family also. They should be patient, realizing they're dealing with a sick person. I'm going to jump from there over to page 91, the middle of the page. We're going to meet most of these people, at least initially, in the fellowship. Some people work in the industry and they see them all the time. Some people see them through their employer. But the vast majority of people that come in here, they're going to meet the people at the fellowship meetings they attend, right? Isn't that how you met most of them originally? So let's look at their experience. They didn't have a fellowship as vast as what we have now, but the suggestion still applies. It says, see your man alone if possible. How many of you have found that can be complex at a fellowship meeting? So how do you do it, those of you that are working with others?
Coffee. Before the meeting.
Meeting before the meeting, meeting after the meeting, whatever. Get them, right? Yeah. Okay, at first engage in general conversation. What's that look like?
How you doing?
Exactly. How many of you have come in for your first day or days and got inundated with all kinds of things you needed to do? Don't know nothing about you, man. I just came in to pee. You know? So if you really want to be helpful, you got to remember those first day or days when we came in here hoping no one would pay any attention to us. Any of you like me? God, I hope I don't run into anyone that knows me. After a while, turn the talk to some phase of drinking. Tell him enough about your drinking habits, symptoms, and experiences to encourage him to speak of himself. So what are my drinking habits, experiences, symptoms? Not so much in Alcoholics Anonymous, but how many of you, for a while, thought you were still using the way you wanted to?
Yeah.
then you thought, boy, it's not safe for me to even do one. And then you thought, well, maybe I overreacted. Maybe one wouldn't hurt. Any of you have any of those kind of mental masturbations going on? Okay, so what we want to do is talk to them in a way they can understand and not talk in a foreign language, if we could. You know, if they've seen the book, then we can start talking to them about craving and obsession and all the things that the doctor points out. But the fact of the matter is, what people relate to is real. Okay? If he wishes to talk, let him do so. You'll thus get a better idea how you ought to proceed. Isn't that a novel idea? Let them talk. They'll tell me what they're willing to do. You ever had that happen where you just greeted someone, didn't judge them, and they just puked all over you, a whole life story? Remember, they're not talking to you, they're talking to him. Act accordingly. Does that make sense? The light finally came on. Now they're going to dump it. Okay. All right, so if he's not communicative, give him a sketch of your drinking career up to the time you quit, but say nothing for the moment of how that was accomplished. Why not? We do want them to ask. Why do we want them to ask? Because when they ask, I'm going to tell them precisely what happened to me. And if they're not ready to receive it, they're going to get blasted with something they don't know. You know what I'm talking about? People have been talking to them for years about what I do today to stay sober. There's nothing I can do today to stay sober. There was nothing I could do to get sober. I drank myself to death. I was an empty shell of a man. I was on a scrap heap, and this power came into me, took me in another direction, and I've never been the same. Yeah. That's why we want them to ask, because otherwise you're like, what the fuck? Okay. Whew. You need some shield pills. Okay, so if he's in a serious mood, dwell on the troubles liquor has caused you, being careful not to moralize or lecture. What's that look like? Or ourselves. We got to be really careful. It became sort of vogue for a while for us to describe ourselves in disparaging terms. And when we do that, the new guy hears, you mean like me? So at my worst and at my best, I was a child of the living God. This process proved that to me. And all that was preparation for this moment. So for me to describe myself as a liar or a piece of shit, no, I was a human that had a calling that I had not yet recognized. Does it make sense? Okay. All right, so if his mood is light, tell him humorous stories of your escapades, get him to tell some of his. So how many of you have some humorous stories? Bucket loads, right? If it was all not fun, we wouldn't have stayed out there so long messing with it, right? So there's lots of, when does that story get told? Like Wes said, the meeting before the meeting after the meeting. During the meeting, we're going to tell you who we want you to think we are. After the meeting, before the meeting, we'll tell you who we really are. All you guys who've been here a while, you know I ain't lying. Okay, when he sees you know all about the drinking game, commence to describe yourself as an alcoholic. Tell him how baffled you were and how you finally learned that you were sick. So how did you learn that you were sick? Are you still in the process of learning that you were sick? How many of you got attacked by your mind today? All these spiritual giants and you still got attacked, huh? Yeah, all of us do, right? Okay, give an account of the struggles you made to stop. Did you make struggles to stop? The steps help you with that. The reason we do the steps is so we can arm ourselves with the facts. What I was like, what happened, what I'm like now, or what I hope to be like, right? And so the whole point of the steps is to get me to know me. And in getting to know me, I know the difference between me and this power that restores. Because me doesn't go away. I still think like Joe, but sometimes I'm empowered to act better than Joe. Any of you had that experience?
Yes.
Okay. And then it proves to me this power. We prove the power we call God to us through us. Because it's sensory, because we're used to seeking a buzz. We seek spiritual inebriation, not abstinence. Okay, so show him the mental twist which leads to the first drink of a spree. What's that for you? Any of you abstinent for a time and working with a bunch of people and they were going out to have a few because it was a rough week? And you're sitting there thinking to yourself, God, I had a rough week too. Why can't I go? Then eventually we give in to that. We find out why we can't go. Because those guys go home and I go live under a bush. Anyone else? Okay.
Hey, I have a nice bush though, okay?
Yeah. We suggest you do this as we've done it on the chapter on alcoholism. So it would help if you've read the book, if you've done what's suggested. What do they talk to us about in the chapter on alcoholism? They talk to us about Jim, the car guy, right? You guys know Jim, the car guy? Even if you're not drinkers, you might not relate to putting whiskey in milk. But think about what he says. He lost his business due to his drinking. So now he's having to go to work for the dealership he once owned. And on the way there, he felt a little agitated. Any of you ever been in a sort of a demeaning position because of your behavior, and every day on the way to work you are just a little agitated? We need to talk about that. It's like me every day. Once he got to work, he had a few words with the boss. Nothing serious. You ever get to work after being a little agitated, have a few words with the boss, but nothing serious? Did you ask the boss how serious he thought it was? Anyway, after he has these words with the boss, Jim goes to his desk and decides, you know, I think I'm going to go out in the woods looking for people to buy cars. Although he's at the dealership where people come to buy cars. So on his way out to these woods where car buyers hang out, he happens to pass a roadside place. And they've got a bar there, but that's no problem because he don't pick up no matter what. He's just going to get him a sandwich. But he has the sandwich and a glass of milk, and then the thought came to him, couldn't hurt me to put a shot in the milk on a full stomach. Any of you ever had such a bright idea? Where's my people that went to the dope house to show the fellas how good you're doing? A week later, they come pulling your ass out. So we can relate to Jim, right? We can relate to Fred. Fred was the guy that didn't think he was serious enough. That's okay for you guys, but I'm fine. And then he has a few months sobriety, goes to New York, not a cloud on the horizon, comes to 3 days later in a cab. Any of you ever come to 3 days later in a cab? In this country or another? Okay, they talk about a jaywalker. It doesn't matter. Whatever you relate to, you relate to. Because what they were telling us next is if he's alcoholic, he'll understand you at once. Your laughter tells me you relate. That's not good news if you're hoping not to be alcoholic. It's none of my business. Okay, he'll match your mental inconsistencies with some of his own. Can you now see the benefit of the meeting before the meeting, the meeting after the meeting? Okay, if you're satisfied that he's a real alcoholic, begin to dwell on the hopeless feature of the malady. So how would I know what a real alcoholic was versus whatever? Because this book's self-defining, so I'd have to go to where they tell me what a real alcoholic is, wouldn't I? What do they tell me about the real alcoholic? Seldom mildly intoxicated, always more or less insanely drunk. Where's my drinkers? How many of you never thought you were insanely drunk, but everyone treating you thought you were fucking insane? You should be hospitalized. Hence my arrival, right? Yeah. Okay. Begin to dwell on the hopeless feature of the malady. What is the hopeless feature? Self-knowledge won't fix me, and I don't believe it half the time, right? So whatever, even though I know it's not going to turn out well, after a while I don't really care if it turns out well. I've got this craving, once I put it in my body, I can't control the amount I take, but I've got an obsession that's equally powerful that draws me back in every time. Anyone else? Okay, show him from your own experience how the queer mental condition surrounding that first drink prevents normal functioning of the willpower. Do you know that from your story? How many of you had some clean time, and then whatever, and then you didn't? Don't at this stage refer to this book unless he's seen it and wishes to discuss it, and be careful not to brand him an alcoholic. Let him draw his own conclusion. Why do you think they told us that?
It hurt them. Their self-esteem is probably shot.
There's probably a lot of good reasons. That's probably a good. The fact of the matter is, my opinion of what their condition is has no bearing on them anyway. How many of you had a lot of people thinking you're alcoholic? I think you need a drink, right? My problem is your attitude about my drinking. I'll drink to that. All right. So if he sticks to the idea that he can still control his drinking, tell him possibly he can if he's not too alcoholic. How many of you have tried that on someone you're working with? No one wants to be told they're not alcoholic enough. I can promise you. They may not want to be alcoholics, but you tell them they're not addict enough. Oh, yes, I am. Let me... They'll match your mental inconsistencies with some of their own. Okay, but insist that if he's severely afflicted, there may be little chance he can recover by himself. Continue to speak of alcoholism as an illness, a fatal malady. It's so important that we let them know that we're sickened in mind and body. And of course you don't know the truth because your perception of the truth is a lie. What we learn here is that the world reflects how we think and feel. It doesn't cause it. So everything out there that I think is causing my addiction is a lie. Do you understand? Not because someone told me, but because I proved it myself through this process. Okay, so talk about the conditions of body and mind which accompany it. So you know what that looks like. How many of you took it out further than some? Like you got to the place where, at least I'm not that bad yet, and then all of a sudden you were? Keep his attention focused mainly on your personal experience. Explain that many are doomed who never realize their predicament. How many of you have met them? Hang around here very long, you will meet those that never realize their predicament. Okay. Doctors are rightly loath to tell alcoholic patients the whole story unless it'll serve some good purpose. But you may talk to them about the hopelessness of alcoholism because you offer a solution. What solution do I offer? The steps are not the solution. They're a process of revealing the solution to me through me. We've falsely taught that the steps are a solution, and it's fine to have faith in the process. But the fact is, our faith comes from the flow of the Spirit that we discover within us, regardless of our belief. The steps are nothing more than a set of suggestions that will reveal that power to us, through us in a tangible way. Does it make sense? So the only thing I got to offer is free. And I didn't find them. We were brought together. Does it make sense? Okay. So it goes on to, if his own doctor is willing to tell him he's alcoholic, so much the better. Even though your protege may not have entirely admitted his condition, he's become very curious to know how you got well. Let him ask you that question if he will. What if he won't? Break up the meeting, keep talking, wait. Because if they don't ask, they won't get the full flow. Just a fact. When they do ask, and you hit them with the truth, just like Ebby did for Bill. Remember Ebby's meeting with Bill? Bill said, come on, what's this about? He said, I got religion. Bill's like, oh, shit. I hate religion. And then Ebby just talked to him for hours, and he didn't act like a religious person. And all of a sudden, Bill started having revelations of his past, his grandfather, his wartime days, and all of a sudden he was flowing in the Spirit. And about 3 weeks later, he went to detox for the last time. Okay, so it says, tell him exactly what happened to you. Stress the spiritual feature freely. Why? That's all there is, guys. The fellowship offers all kinds of things. Cake, cookies, coffee. The program offers your revelation of a power within you greater than you. Why did I need a power within me greater than me? Because this same mind who wasn't picking up no matter what thought I'd overreacted. And I could even have the argument in my mind, look at this crazy bastard, look at what he's going to do. The police will be there. Yeah, I know, come on. All in my head. Anyone know what I'm talking about? Come on, bring a camera, it'll be good. Okay. All right, so if the man be agnostic or atheist, make it emphatic he does not have to agree with your conception of God. Why not? Because God is not a conception. God is an experience. The subject of my experience, not the object of my belief. So it doesn't matter what I believe. It doesn't matter what you believe. Does that make sense? He can choose any conception he likes, provided it makes sense to him. Now, they did give you precise instructions before this point where and how to find this power. So that silly shit we've taught for years in the fellowship about doorknobs and light bulbs, stop it. Unless you swallow that motherfucker, that ain't the power. The main thing is that he be willing to believe in a power greater than himself and that he live by spiritual principles. They're going to give me the principles in the steps. They're going to show me a new manner of living. And I'm going to believe in a power because they introduced me to 1 and 2, a tangible power that expressed itself as power, peace, happiness, and a sense of direction. So once a confused and baffled soul, all of a sudden, a new direction. How many of you experienced it? Okay. All right, so when dealing with such a person, you'd better use everyday language to describe spiritual principles. There's no use arousing any prejudice he may have against certain theological terms and conceptions, about which he may already be confused. So that at that point, that's when you're going to have to find out what their religious views are. You got to have that whole interview, because if all they can hear is Christianity, you better be able to talk in Christianity. If all they can hear is Buddhism, you better be able to talk in Buddhism. And if you're not equipped to do it, you'll have to get to know the Spirit, won't you? I met a guy one time in rabbinical training, and he was damn near a rabbi, and he was sitting there dying of meth addiction. And I'm talking to him, and he's telling me all the reasons why AA didn't work. And all of a sudden, he's getting blasted with power, tying everything back to the Kabbalah and the Torah. And he goes, "How do you know that?" I said, "I don't know that. I told you weren't talking to me. And I don't know it today. Someone does." So when... don't raise such issues no matter what your own convictions are. Your prospect may belong to a religious denomination. His religious training may be, education and training may be far superior to yours. I just told you a story of that. In that case, he's going to wonder how you can add anything to what he already knows. Have you ever wondered that? I had a pastor one time goes, "I just don't get how you know so decisively that God is operating in and through you. How does God know exactly how to touch you?" And then he scratched his arm. I said, "How did you know to scratch your arm?" You're part of the body of God. And it's not a theory. Okay? And as you get to know it, you'll get to know it, and the Spirit will speak to them. All right, so he'll be curious to learn why his own convictions have not worked and why yours seem to work so well. He may be an example of truth that faith alone is insufficient. So from another book, Faith Without Works is Dead, they've reminded us of that over and over. Not because it's a rule, but I've got to prove the power to me, through me, because I'm a doubter by nature. Does that make sense? If I don't have tangible experiences on an ongoing basis, as a junkie, I'm going to go get the tangible experiences I know. Okay? So admit that he probably knows more about it than you do, but calls attention to the fact that however deep his faith and knowledge, he could not have applied it or he would not drink. They don't react well to that, just so you know. Perhaps your story will help him see where he's failed to practice the very precepts he knows so well. We represent no particular faith or denomination. We're dealing only with general principles common to most denominations. So then they tell us to outline the program of action, explaining how you made a self-appraisal. So how would I explain how I did it if I had not done it? I couldn't, right? So they've given us a suggested path for making a self-appraisal in here so that we have credibility. The book's a prop, guys. Doesn't matter how you do it, but the book shows you so that you've got credibility, because when we get here, we don't trust anything or anyone. Does it make sense? And all we want you to do is trust power, trust God, clean house, work with others. But the book gives us credibility because this is a story of thousands. Okay? It's important for him to realize that your attempt to pass this on to him plays a vital role in your own recovery. I'm here seeking my spiritual experience, not yours. I hope you get one, because I get a bonus hit when that happens. And you know what I'm talking about? How many of you have been blessed with a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps in working with others? How many of you have taken someone through a 2 or a 3 or a 5 and just got lit up? So we're not lying to them. We always get more power than we need when we offer it to another. It's really kind of a no-brainer why we would do it. Okay, actually he may be helping you more than you're helping him. Make it plain he's under no obligation to you, that you hope only that he will try and help other alcoholics when he escapes his own difficulties. Why do I hope that for you? Because why would you dig up all that shit about your past and not employ it and put purpose in it? Why would I want you sitting there suffering in your mind about a life that you have not yet proved to yourself the purpose in? How many of you thought you wasted your life in addiction? It's a thought we have from time to time. Sometimes we think we've wasted our life in sobriety too. It's true. But once we find out that everything's preparing us for the next phase of our life, and we start employing it, we find that that's not true at all. Suggest how important it is that he place the welfare of other people ahead of his own. Make it clear that he's not under pressure, that he needn't see you again if he doesn't want to. You should not be offended if he wants to call it off, or he's helped you more than you've helped him. So they're going to teach me something, whether they get it or don't. And at a minimum, they're going to teach me to detach, because results aren't mine. I couldn't get me sober. How the hell am I getting you sober? So there's this one power that does this for all of us, right? And we've got to let the power do what the power does. And even if we don't let it do what it does, it has a tendency to do what it does anyway. Okay, so then it goes on, if your talk has been sane, quiet, and full of human understanding, you've perhaps made a friend. How many of you have lots of friends that you've never really done any spiritual work with, but you got to know them, and that happens, okay? Maybe you've disturbed him about the question of alcoholism. How many of you got disturbed about alcoholism or addiction on a few trial runs to the fellowship? I just sat down with a guy today. I had no idea. I've been working with him for 3 years. I had no idea. And he comes into my office and he goes, yeah, I wasn't doing very good. I was drinking myself and then I had a seizure. I don't know why this guy's telling me this. I said, well, let me tell you a little story. He'll be more likely to follow your suggestions. Your candidate may give reasons why he need not follow all of the program. You ever had that happen? How many of you had a whole bunch of reasons why you need not follow all the program? How many of you didn't even know what the program was, truthfully? Because see, the program's described in this book and almost never described with any clarity in any fellowship meeting I've ever been in.
That's right.
So if you don't go to the book, you're never going to know what the program is. Okay, he may rebel at the thought of a drastic house cleaning, which requires discussion with other people. Have you ever looked at that 4-step and thought, not that thing, I ain't telling that thing. So it isn't even, the fact that I'm going to do a 5 will keep me from doing a 4. Right? How many of you have looked at step 8 and looked at a really big list? All the people. How many of you looked at 9 and go, yeah, that ain't happening? And that keeps you from enacting the decision. And they've always known that the power that enacts the decision is the power we meet in 2. A tangible power. How many of you came in and all of a sudden you were ready and just took off and did things you hadn't done forever? Wrote it out, started. What changed? The power. Yep. Okay, so do not contradict such views. I'm not here to tell you what you need to do or I won't work with you. I'm here to tell you I once thought and felt as you did. But I doubt I'd have made much progress had I not taken action. This is the action I took. And this is what I experienced as a result. And you can come or you can not go because I don't get bonus points for signing you. I show up, you show up. Take it or leave it, right? It won't work for them unless they honestly want to and are willing to make the effort. Why would I cheat them out of their recovery by trying to pretend that they're going to follow my suggestions? They'll follow my example. And only when they get curious enough to get, some bitch doesn't seem so miserable as I am. You ever had that experience? It is my nature to be drunk or miserable or both. To not be either one at some percentage of the time is a miracle. Right? Okay. So tell him you once felt as he does, but you doubt whether you would have made much progress had you not taken action. On your first visit, tell him about the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. It is not the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. We've got to quit calling meetings the program. We're confusing people. If he shows interest, lend him a copy of this book. So we got you in a fellowship. Here's a book that describes our program. If you have some questions, be happy to sit down with you and go over it. Not telling them anything, right? And we lend them a copy. We don't tell them what they got to buy, whatever. Got it? Unless your friend wants to talk further about himself, do not wear out your welcome. Give him a chance to think it over. If you do stay, let him steer the conversation in any direction he likes. Sometimes a new man is anxious to proceed at once, and you may be tempted to let him do so. This is sometimes a mistake. If he has trouble later, he's likely to say that you rushed him. As someone who's worked with a lot of people, I can assure you at some point they are still going to be angry because they're going to find out I'm human too. But whatever. You know what I mean? You're going to have to, that's all between you and the Spirit. You'll be most successful with alcoholics if you do not exhibit any passion for crusade or reform. Never talk down to an alcoholic from any moral or spiritual hilltop. Simply lay out the kit of spiritual tools for his inspection. So here's the steps. Here's why I take them. Here, and the steps, what we don't do very well either is explain to them it's just a manner of living. All the inventory did was teach me that the world reflected how I thought and felt, didn't cause it. And then once I know that, I'm just constantly inventorying my thoughts and discarding those that are telling me the world's on attack. Does it make sense? So every time I think you're causing how I think and feel, that's a lie. You're not causing it. I'm thinking and feeling it, but you are just the current object that's reflecting it back to me. Does it make sense? Some of them are very bright, and the reflection's painful. But that's why we have a power greater than ourselves. Love and tolerance of others is our code. Right? Tolerate the intolerable. The ones that are friendly and loving and all that shit aren't the ones that are going to teach me any tolerance. It's going to be the asshole that teaches me tolerance. Okay? Offer him friendship and fellowship. Tell him if he wants to get well, you'll do anything to help. That's the promise we can offer them. If you want to get well, I'll do anything to help you get well. How many of you got told, you don't ever have to feel this way again if you don't want to? How many of you found out that was a lie? You're probably going to feel worse. There are going to be days in sobriety you got nothing to medicate it. You know what I'm talking about? And that's a push to get going or a push to get going. It was explained to me, get to God or get to God, Joe. Oh, I thought I had a choice. Well, you do. Get to God or get to God. Pick one. Anyway, if he's not interested in your solution, if he expects you to only act as a banker for his financial difficulties or a nurse for his sprees, you may have to drop him until he changes his mind. This he may do after he gets hurt some more. So if they want to run, let them run. You're not powerful enough of a persuasive force. That's hard to do. I have a child in the grave and one in the penitentiary. So I do know what it feels like to watch it happen. But I had no more power over them than I did over my own. Does it make sense? Yes. Okay, let's go over to 97 because I don't want to run out of time. In 97, they tell us this job description. In 3, they promised me when we sincerely take such a position, we have a new employer. Right? Being all-powerful, he provides what we need if we keep close to him and perform his work well. Now they're going to tell me what that work is, a job description, if you will. So it says on 97, never avoid these responsibilities, but be sure you're doing the right thing if you assume them. Helping others is the foundation stone of your recovery. What's the likelihood that your recovery can be supported without stone? So how important is a crisp message to them for you? Given that whatever healing they need flows through you, you get a hit on the way by. Remember, we don't know what we need. How many of you have had a life that took a completely different trajectory that you never could have predicted? So we were getting prepared for something we thought we knew, but we didn't know. Okay, a kindly act once in a while isn't enough. You have to act the Good Samaritan every day if need be. So a biblical reference that sneaks into our text, not by accident. But what does the Good Samaritan teach us? Love your neighbor as yourself. Who's the good neighbor? The good neighbor wasn't the religious guy, wasn't the legal, the Pharisee. It was the Samaritan who was not supposed to have anything to do with the guy that bandaged his wounds, took him to the end, paid his tab. He treated him as a brother, even though he wasn't permitted religiously to even talk to him. So in spite of our differences, we're going to have to show kindness in a radical way every day if need be. Does that make sense? It may mean the loss of many nights' sleep. How many of you have had that experience? How many of you caused a lot of other people loss of many nights' sleep? So now you can see the 12th step is the 9th step. It's just the 9th step prepares me for the big amends, which is the 12th step. Great interference with your pleasures. How many of you would have to admit you probably interfered with a lot of people's pleasures? Can you come get me? I'm down under the bush again. Interruptions to your business. It may mean sharing your money in your home, counseling frantic wives and relatives, innumerable trips to police courts, sanitariums, hospitals, jails, and asylum. Your telephone may jangle at any time of the day or night. Your wife may sometimes say she is neglected. A drunk may smash the furniture in your home or burn a mattress. You may have to fight with him if he's violent. Sometimes you'll have to call a doctor and administer sedatives under his direction. You ever had to do that? How many of you have taken someone down to community bridges? And they'd just been doing meth, so you had them drink a quart of whiskey on the way down so they could get them in. That's what we call administering sedatives. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Another time you may have to send for the police or an ambulance. Occasionally you have to meet such conditions. So they've told me now that that's my job. Now that you've been restored, now you're going to go do the work. Does that make sense to you? Okay, I'm going to jump from there to 98, second paragraph. Remember last week, if you were here, we talked about it's time to grow in understanding and effectiveness, and we were sort of speculating on what that is. Now in step 12, they're going to tell us what that is. So in this, it says it's not a matter of giving that's in question, but when and how to give. So understanding of when and effectiveness at how. Does that make sense? Because not everybody needs what they're asking for, and they never need my opinion. And that sometimes I think my opinion is very valuable. You got to remember that we got here, they told us in 6 and 7, we are people who have spent thousands of dollars for informed medical opinions. And we lied to get those opinions and then ignored the results of those opinions. That's who shows up here. So my opinion really has little bearing on what they're going to do. Does that make sense? Okay. That often makes the difference between failure and success. Whose? Ours. Don't go any further than your eyes and ears. Okay. The minute we put our work on a service plane, the alcoholic commences to rely upon our assistance rather than upon God. When we talk to you of God, what are we talking about? Power, a sensory experience of power, peace, happiness, and a sense of direction. I couldn't talk you out of a drink or a drug because you knew what it felt like before you got it, right? Even if you sat and listened to my bullshit lecture, you're still, yeah. I'm leaving here and going to the dope house. Fuck you. And if you don't believe that's what we think, I'm telling you, I've been on both sides. I had a bottle under the seat, you know? Okay. He clamors for this or that, claiming he cannot master alcohol until his material needs are cared for. Nonsense. Some of us have taken very hard knocks to learn this truth. So what is the truth they had to learn? Job or no job, wife or no wife, we simply do not stop drinking so long as we place dependence on other people ahead of dependence on God. And when we talk to you about God, we're not talking about a fellowship room, we're not talking about a doorknob or a light bulb, we're talking about a sensory experience from within. And if we don't teach you that and show you that and let you experience that, we've cheated you out of your recovery. Does that make sense? So burn the idea into the consciousness of every man that he can get well regardless of anyone. How many of you have seen that? How many of you are examples of that? The only condition is that he trusts in God and clean house. So how am I going to do that? Well, I've got a suggestive path for cleaning house. The house cleaning isn't done until I've employed that terrible experience. The inventory isn't the house cleaning. The active work with others is the house cleaning, because now I see how that experience can benefit others. Does that make sense? Why do we work with others? Not because it's a rule, not because somebody told you had to, not because someone said you had to have a sponsor and you didn't know what that meant, because I get more power than I need when I offer it to another. And if I speak clearly of the power moves through. And I get a buzz, and I like a buzz. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go over from there to the bottom of the page of 99. Let no alcoholic say he cannot recover unless he has his family back. This just isn't so. In some cases, the wife will never come back for one reason or another. Remind the prospect that his recovery is not dependent upon people. It's dependent upon his relationship with God. You won't know of your relationship with God until you have your own thoughts and then the power to act kinder than you feel moving through you. The power to tolerate the intolerable, to love the unlovely. As that power starts flowing through you, you will know what religious people were talking about that you were rejecting. But you won't reject it anymore because we don't reject buzzes around here. We have seen men get well whose families have not returned at all. We've seen others slip when the family came back too soon. Both you and the new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. Now that sentence confuses a lot of people because we come here and we work with lots of people and a lot of them disappear, don't they? But what they're talking about is the experience of fellowship with the Spirit. Remember, I was going to grow in consciousness, the awareness of being aware. So the new man I'm walking with day by day is within me. Does that make sense? Some of you are feeling it, so I know you know. Okay, so that's what they tell you. And then they start talking about what will happen as you become aware of that presence within you. If you persist, remarkable things will happen. How many of you have had that happen? Okay. When we look back, we realize that the things which came to us when we put ourselves in God's hands were better than anything we could have planned. Follow the dictates of a higher power and you'll presently live in a new and wonderful world no matter what your present circumstances. How many of you took it out far enough that it had to change radically right then and there, even though your circumstances didn't change? I came up through the homeless shelters. So if it hadn't changed right now, I'd be dead on the street or still on the street. Does it make sense to what I'm telling you? Is there any of you that have ever even visited, you know what I'm talking about? It's a stark change for the way I was raised. I was not equipped for homelessness. Still not real good at it. Okay, so when working with a man and his family, you should take care not to participate in their quarrels. You may spoil your chance of being helpful. We don't do as much of that anymore, but you know, families are baffled by our illness, and they're just as sick as the one we're working with, and they don't have any way to medicate it. So they need a calming voice. And the Spirit knows how to talk to them. That's why we have Al-Anons in here. That's why we have everybody in here. So that we can talk to them about this manner of living that makes us useful to others. Does that make sense? Yes. All right, so I want to go to the middle of page 101. In our belief, any scheme of combating alcoholism which proposes to shield the sick man from temptation is doomed to failure. How many of you have had that experience? Lock me up, don't just keep it away from me, pour it all out. How many of you have cussed yourself for pouring shit out that you really needed a little bit later? Flushed it down and thought, oh shit, man. Now I gotta go get more. It doesn't work, right? Okay. If the alcoholic tries to shield himself, he may succeed for a time, but he usually winds up with a bigger explosion than ever. Have you been part of that experience? We've tried these methods. These attempts to do the impossible have always failed. We've always known it. We don't go back to the original, and we don't, you can't sell that. That's the problem. All we can do is give freely what we find. All right, so our rule is not to avoid a place where there's drinking if we have a legitimate reason for being there. So don't hide from the world, but don't delude yourself. Make sense? Okay, so I'm going to go over to, let's see, 102. Your job now is to be at the place where you may be of maximum helpfulness to others. So never hesitate to go anywhere if you can be helpful. How many of you have found yourself going to places that you didn't think you'd ever go because you were working with somebody? How many of you found yourself in places you didn't think you would ever go because you were someone who needed work? So who knows better who should be down there but you? You know the difference between me and the detox and the guy who walks in and walks out is I know how to walk in and walk out. That's the thing that baffled me when I was in there. And it has nothing to do with me, and they need to be told that. How many of you got on that train? Back to the detox. Back. Okay. You should not hesitate to visit the most sordid spot on earth on such an errand. Keep on the firing line of life with these motives, and God will keep you unharmed. It's a powerful promise. Do whatever it is the Spirit tells you to do, but make sure, check with the Spirit, get a second confirmation with the Spirit, and then go. Does it make sense? I'm going to go to the last page. It says, someday we hope that Alcoholics Anonymous will help the public to better realization of the gravity of the alcoholic problem. But we shall be of little use if our attitude is one of bitterness or hostility. I'm not angry at alcohol. I'm not angry at methamphetamines, cocaine, or heroin. I'm not angry at the opiate crisis. All of those things served a purpose. But there's an awakening available. Does that make sense? Drinkers will not stand for it. After all, our problems were of our own making. Bottles were only a symbol. How many of you discovered that? Sobered up, you thought alcohol or drugs were the problem, and all of a sudden you wake up all sober and you still got a problem. Besides, we've stopped fighting anybody or anything. We have to. Thanks. We'll be in one next week.